Hello and welcome. Thank you for being here tonight. Whatever brought you to this moment, whatever thoughts are still lingering in your mind, you can let them go now. There is nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to do. Tonight, we are going on a gentle journey together, a journey through time, through the vast and beautiful story of humanity. But this is not a history lesson. This is something softer, something slower. Think of it as a bedtime story told by time itself. So find a comfortable position. Let your body sink into whatever is holding you. Feel the weight of your head, your shoulders, your arms. Allow your breathing to slow, to deepen. Breathe in gently through your nose and out through your mouth. Again, in and out. Good. You are safe. You are still. And as you rest here, we will walk together through the long, winding path of human history, not to learn, but simply to wonder, to feel connected to something vast and ancient and ongoing. Every fact I share with you tonight is like a soft light in the darkness, a small flame carried across millennia just for you. There is no hurry. There is no test. There is only the quiet unfolding of our shared story and the permission to drift, to dream, to let go. So, breathe with me once more. In, hold, and release. And now, let us begin. Imagine, if you will, a landscape 3 million years ago. The Earth is younger then, wild and untouched by cities or roads or the hum of engines. Picture the golden savanna of East Africa, stretching endlessly beneath a sky so clear you could see every star. There are no streetlights, no buildings, no borders, just grass swaying in the wind, acacia trees casting long shadows, and footprints in volcanic ash. These footprints, preserved for all these millions of years, belong to our ancestors. They walked upright, which was new, which was revolutionary. They were not quite like us, not yet, but they carried within them the seed of everything we would become. Her name, given by scientists much later, was Lucy. She stood about 3.5 feet tall, small and delicate, but she walked on 2 legs across that ancient world. Australopithecus afarensis, they called her species. But names do not matter so much right now. What matters is this. She was one of the first to stand, to look out across the horizon with eyes unclouded by the need to survive moment to moment. With her hands free, no longer needed for walking, her descendants would one day hold tools, hold each other, hold the future. Lucy lived over 3 million years ago, and she was not alone. There were others like her, small bands of early humans, moving slowly across the African continent, learning, adapting, surviving. They had no language as we know it, no cities, no books. But they had something. They had curiosity. They had the ability to look at the world and wonder. And that wonder, that small spark, would carry them forward across unimaginable stretches of time. Take a breath now. Feel your chest rise and fall. You are lying here in this moment because Lucy and her kind survived, because they walked and kept walking. There is something deeply comforting in that, is there not? You are the product of 3 million years of survival, of resilience, of ancestors who refused to disappear. And then, slowly, over hundreds of thousands of years, those early humans began to change. Their brains grew larger. Their bodies adapted. They learned to make fire, which was perhaps the most important discovery in all of human history. Fire meant warmth on cold nights. Fire meant protection from predators. Fire meant cooked food, which provided more energy, which allowed brains to grow even larger still. And around those fires, something magical began to happen. They gathered. They sat together under the stars, faces illuminated by flickering light, and they began to communicate in ways that went beyond grunts and gestures. Picture those ancient fires burning in the darkness, small flames dancing against the vast African night, and around them our ancestors, learning to be human, learning to share, to cooperate, to tell stories. Fire was more than just a tool. It was a gathering place. It was safety. It was the first home that could travel with you, carried from place to place, passed from generation to generation, never allowed to go out. Some anthropologists believe that fire, more than anything else, made us who we are. It gave us time in the evenings when we were no longer exhausted from chewing raw food, time to think, to talk, to bond. About 70,000 years ago, maybe earlier, maybe later, humans developed the capacity for complex language. No one knows exactly when or how it happened. It is one of the great mysteries lost to time. But at some point, a sound made in the throat became a word. A word became a sentence became a story. And with stories came the ability to share not just information, but dreams, fears, hopes, memories. Language changed everything. Imagine the first time a parent told their child about something that happened yesterday or long ago. The child could learn without experiencing danger firsthand. Imagine the first time someone described a place they had seen beyond the hills, a river full of fish, a valley rich with fruit. Language allowed humans to cooperate in new ways, to plan, to imagine futures that did not yet exist. It made us, in a very real sense, who we are. Even now, as you listen to these words, you are experiencing something that is tens of thousands of years old. This invisible thread between minds, this transfer of thought through sound, is ancient magic. And you can rest in that magic now. Let the words wash over you like a gentle stream. There is no need to hold on to any of them. They are just here to keep you company, to remind you that you are part of something much larger than yourself. Those early humans, armed with language and fire and tools, began to move. Around 60,000 years ago, small groups left Africa and ventured into the unknown. They walked across land bridges that no longer exist, crossed deserts and mountains and rivers, and slowly, over thousands of years, they spread across the entire world. Some went east into Asia, some went north into Europe, some, much later, crossed into the Americas. It was the greatest journey in human history, and it happened on foot, one generation at a time, with nothing but courage and curiosity to guide them. What did they see, those travelers? Skies unpolluted by anything but stars, auroras dancing in the north, animals that no longer exist, vast and strange and beautiful. They saw landscapes untouched, silent except for wind and water and the calls of creatures. They walked for years, for lifetimes, and they had no maps, no certainty that anything lay ahead. But they walked anyway. And because they did, we are here. Every human alive today, all 8 billion of us, carries the DNA of those travelers. We are all African. We are all wanderers. We are all connected by that ancient journey. Breathe deeply now. Let that connection settle into your bones. You are not alone. You have never been alone. You are part of an unbroken chain stretching back further than you can imagine. For most of human history, our ancestors were hunter-gatherers. They moved with the seasons, following herds of animals, gathering plants and nuts and berries. They lived in small bands, maybe 20 or 30 people, and they knew each person intimately. There was no money, no property in the way we think of it, no kings or presidents. Decisions were made together. Resources were shared. Life was hard, certainly, but it was also, in some ways, simple. You woke with the sun. You found food. You told stories around the fire. You slept under stars. And then, about 12,000 years ago, something extraordinary happened. In a region we now call the Fertile Crescent, in the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, humans began to settle down. They started planting seeds: wheat, barley, lentils, peas. They domesticated animals: sheep, goats, cattle, pigs. This was the agricultural revolution, and it changed everything. For the first time in history, humans stayed in one place. They built permanent homes. They stored surplus food. And with surplus came time. Time to do things other than search for the next meal. Some people became potters, shaping clay into vessels. Some became weavers, turning plant fibers into cloth. Some became builders, stacking stones into walls. Slowly, over generations, villages grew into towns, towns into cities. Civilization, as we know it, was born. But it came at a cost. Agriculture meant harder work. Farmers labored in fields from dawn to dusk. Staying in one place meant disease spread more easily. The human skeleton actually became less robust during this period. Bones show signs of malnutrition and stress. And yet, there was no going back. Agriculture allowed populations to grow. It allowed for specialization, for art, for writing, for all the complexity that would follow. It was a trade, freedom for security, wandering for belonging. And humanity made that trade again and again all over the world. In China, they domesticated rice and millet. In Mesoamerica, corn and beans and squash. In Africa, sorghum and yams. Independently, in different places, humans learned to shape the earth to their needs. You can let go of any tension now. Feel your jaw unclench. Feel your shoulders drop. You are not responsible for any of this history. You are simply floating through it, a gentle observer, safe and warm. One of the most mysterious places from this early period is a site in southern Turkey called Göbekli Tepe. It dates to around 11,000 years ago, which makes it older than the pyramids, older than Stonehenge, older than almost anything else we have found. And here is the extraordinary thing. Göbekli Tepe was built by hunter-gatherers, people who had not yet settled into farming villages. It is a temple, massive stone pillars carved with images of animals arranged in circles. Why did they build it? No one knows. What rituals took place there? We can only imagine. But it tells us something profound. The need to gather, to create sacred space, to reach towards something greater than ourselves, is ancient. It predates cities. It predates agriculture. It is woven into what it means to be human. The first cities rose along rivers. Water was life. In Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers, cities like Uruk and Ur emerged around 5,000 years ago. In Egypt, along the Nile, great civilizations flourished. In the Indus Valley, sophisticated urban centers with advanced drainage systems thrived. In China, along the Yellow River, dynasties began their long march through time. These were not small villages. Uruk, at its height, had perhaps 50,000 people living within its walls. 50,000. It is hard to imagine, coming from a world of scattered bands, suddenly living among thousands of strangers. And with cities came writing. The Sumerians developed cuneiform, pressing wedge-shaped marks into soft clay tablets. The Egyptians created hieroglyphs, beautiful and mysterious symbols carved into stone. The Chinese developed characters that are, remarkably still in use today. Writing allowed humans to keep records, to preserve laws, to send messages across distances and even across time. Every book you have ever read, every text message, every sign and label traces back to those first marks made in clay and stone. Writing made memory external. It allowed the dead to speak to the living. It allowed knowledge to accumulate across generations. Let your breathing slow even more now, in and out. You are doing beautifully. Just let the words drift past like clouds. These early civilizations built wonders. The Egyptians raised pyramids, tombs for their god-kings, aligned with stars, and built with such precision that we still marvel at them today. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built around 4,500 years ago, was the tallest structure in the world for over 3,000 years. 3,000 years. Think of that. Empires rose and fell, languages were born and died, and still the pyramids stood, silent and eternal. In Mesopotamia, they built ziggurats, massive step pyramids reaching toward the heavens. These were temples, places where earth met sky, where priests conducted rituals to appease the gods. The most famous, the Tower of Babel from biblical legend, may have been inspired by these structures. Humans have always built upward, always reached for something beyond the ground beneath their feet. The ancient world was a tapestry of cultures, each developing its own answers to the great questions. Who are we? Why are we here? What happens when we die? The Egyptians believed in an afterlife so vividly that they mummified their dead and filled tombs with everything needed for the journey. The Mesopotamians saw their gods as capricious and powerful, requiring constant appeasement. The early Chinese practiced ancestor worship, believing the dead remained present, guiding and protecting the living. And then, between about 800 and 200 years before the Common Era, something remarkable happened. Historians call it the Axial Age, and it remains one of the most fascinating mysteries in human history. Across the world, almost simultaneously, great thinkers and spiritual leaders emerged, asking profound questions and offering new ways of understanding existence. In India, a prince named Siddhartha Gautama left his palace and sat beneath a tree until he achieved enlightenment. He became the Buddha, the awakened one, and taught that suffering comes from attachment, that peace comes from letting go. His teachings spread across Asia, shaping billions of lives over thousands of years. In China, a man named Confucius, whom we know as Confucius, taught about harmony, respect, and the importance of moral character. He believed that if individuals cultivated virtue, society would flourish. His ideas became the foundation of Chinese civilization for millennia. In Greece, philosophers like Socrates questioned everything. He walked the streets of Athens, engaging people in dialogue, pushing them to examine their beliefs. His student Plato founded the academy, and Plato's student Aristotle tutored Alexander the Great and wrote about everything from ethics to biology to politics. Greek philosophy shaped Western thought so profoundly that it is difficult to imagine our world without it. In Israel, prophets spoke of justice, compassion, and a single universal God. Their words would become the Hebrew Bible, foundational to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Why did this happen? Why did so many profound thinkers emerge in different parts of the world at roughly the same time, with no contact between them? No one truly knows. Some scholars suggest it was a response to the complexity and challenges of urban life. Others see it as a natural evolution of human consciousness. Perhaps it was simply time for humanity to look inward, to question not just how to survive, but how to live. You can feel yourself relaxing more deeply now. Your body is heavy, pleasantly heavy, sinking into rest. The story continues, and you are safe within it. As civilizations grew, so did the connections between them. The Silk Road was not a single road, but a vast network of trade routes stretching from China in the east to the Mediterranean in the west, spanning over 4,000 miles. For over 1,000 years, caravans of camels and horses carried silk and spices, jade and gold, glass and precious stones across deserts and mountains. But the Silk Road carried more than goods. It carried ideas. Buddhism traveled from India to China, transforming along the way, blending with local traditions to create new forms. Paper, invented in China, traveled west and revolutionized Europe. Gunpowder, the compass, printing, all moved along these routes. And stories too. Travelers shared tales of distant lands, of customs and beliefs, of wonders seen and imagined. The world, vast as it was connected. Slowly, patiently, persistently connected. Merchants and monks, soldiers and scholars all traveled these roads. Marco Polo, the Venetian explorer, journeyed to China in the 13th century and returned with tales so extraordinary that many did not believe him. But his accounts opened European eyes to the vastness and richness of the East. The Silk Road reminds us that isolation is an illusion. Humans have always moved, always traded, always shared. Every stranger was once a traveler bringing news from beyond the horizon. And yet, connections also brought danger. In the 14th century, ships arrived in European ports carrying more than goods. They carried fleas, and those fleas carried a bacterium called Yersinia pestis. The Black Death, as it came to be known, swept across Europe with terrifying speed. Between 1347 and 1353, it killed an estimated 1/3 of Europe's population, perhaps 50 million people. Villages were emptied, cities became graveyards. Survivors wandered through landscapes haunted by loss. It is difficult to comprehend suffering on such a scale. Families torn apart, children left orphaned, fields left unplowed because there was no one left to work them. The medieval world, with its rigid hierarchies and certainties, shattered. But humans, as always, endured. And from that darkness, something unexpected emerged. The Renaissance, the rebirth. Survivors found themselves in a world with more resources per person, more opportunity. Labor became valuable. Peasants could demand better wages. The rigid feudal system began to crack. And in Italy, in cities like Florence and Venice, wealth and newfound freedom sparked an explosion of art and learning. Leonardo da Vinci painted and invented, his mind restless and endlessly curious. Michelangelo carved David from marble and painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, creating beauty that still moves us to tears. Dante wrote of heaven and hell. Petrarch rediscovered classical texts and helped spark humanism, the belief that human beings, not just God, were worthy of study and celebration. The Renaissance was not perfect. It was often brutal, marked by war and inequality. But it represented a shift, a turning point. Humans looked back to the wisdom of Greece and Rome and looked forward to what they might create. Art flourished. Science began to emerge from the shadow of religion. The printing press, invented by Johannes Gutenberg around 1440, made books accessible. Ideas could spread faster than ever before. The world was opening, expanding, becoming new. Breathe deeply now. Feel the rise and fall of your chest. You are part of this same story, this same unfolding. You carry within you the resilience of plague survivors, the curiosity of Renaissance artists, the courage of ancient travelers. You are connected to all of it. In the late 15th century, European explorers began to sail beyond the known world. Maps of that era showed vast blank spaces, edges marked with the words, "Here be dragons," or simply left empty, waiting to be filled. Sailors feared falling off the edge of the world, feared sea monsters lurking in uncharted waters, feared never returning home. And yet, they sailed anyway, driven by curiosity, by the promise of wealth, by the simple human desire to see what lies beyond the horizon. Christopher Columbus, an Italian navigator sailing under the Spanish flag, believed he could reach Asia by sailing west across the Atlantic. He was wrong about the distance, wrong about what he would find, but right that something lay out there in the vast blue unknown. In 1492, after more than a month at sea, watching the sun set into endless water night after night, his small fleet finally sighted land. Columbus believed he had reached the Indies, islands off the coast of Asia. He had not. He had stumbled upon two enormous continents that Europeans did not know existed, lands that would come to be called the Americas. These lands were not empty. They were home to millions of people, to civilizations as complex and sophisticated as any in Europe. The Aztec Empire, centered in what is now Mexico, was a vast realm with elaborate cities, advanced agriculture, intricate art, and a rich spiritual life. Their capital, Tenochtitlan, was built on an island in the middle of a lake, connected to the shore by causeways, with canals running through it like Venice. The city was home to perhaps 200,000 people, making it one of the largest cities in the world at that time. When Spanish conquistadors first saw it in 1519, led by Hernán Cortés, they could hardly believe their eyes. Some said it was the most beautiful city they had ever seen, with gardens floating on the water, markets filled with goods from across the empire, temples rising like mountains toward the sky. In South America, the Inca Empire stretched for thousands of miles along the western coast, from what is now Colombia to Chile, connected by an extensive network of roads and bridges built through some of the most challenging terrain on Earth. These roads, some paved with stone, some carved into cliffsides, allowed messengers to carry news across the empire in days, a feat that would not be matched in Europe for centuries. The Inca had no written language as Europeans understood it, but they kept detailed records using quipus, knotted strings that encoded information about census data, tribute payments, and historical events. They built cities high in the Andes, including Machu Picchu, a site so remote and well hidden that it remained unknown to the outside world until 1911, when an American historian stumbled upon it with the help of local guides. The collision of these worlds, the meeting of peoples who had been separated for over 10,000 years since their ancestors crossed from Asia into the Americas, was both wondrous and catastrophic. Europeans brought horses, which had been extinct in the Americas for millennia, and watching indigenous peoples encounter these animals for the first time must have been extraordinary. These large, powerful creatures that could carry humans across great distances. They brought wheat and barley, cattle and pigs, iron tools and weapons. But they also brought diseases: smallpox, measles, typhus, influenza, Diseases to which Europeans had developed some immunity over centuries of exposure swept through indigenous populations with devastating speed. People who had never been exposed to these pathogens had no resistance. Entire villages were wiped out in weeks. Historians estimate that within a century of contact, up to 90% of the indigenous population of the Americas had died, primarily from disease. It was a tragedy of almost incomprehensible scale, the collapse of entire civilizations, the loss of languages and knowledge and ways of life that could never be recovered. Breathe gently now. This is a heavy part of the story, but it is part of the story nonetheless. History does not offer us only beauty. It offers us truth in all its complexity. And we can hold that truth softly, with compassion for all who suffered, with awareness of how deeply the past shapes the present. You do not need to carry this pain tonight. You can simply acknowledge it, honor it, and let it rest. The Columbian Exchange, as historians call this great transfer between continents, transformed the world in ways that are still felt today. Foods that we think of as typical to certain cultures often came from elsewhere. Tomatoes, now essential to Italian cuisine, the base of so many sauces and dishes, came from the Americas. Imagine Italian food without tomatoes. It seems impossible, yet tomatoes only arrived in Europe in the 16th century. Potatoes, which became a staple in Ireland and much of Europe, feeding millions and allowing populations to grow, came from the Andes, where indigenous peoples had cultivated them for thousands of years. Corn, or maize, which sustained indigenous peoples across the Americas, spread around the world, becoming a staple crop in Africa, Asia, and Europe. Chocolate, which the Aztecs drank in ceremonial contexts, often mixed with chili peppers and spices, became a beloved treat everywhere, though transformed into something sweeter by European tastes. In the other direction, wheat and rice, which had sustained civilizations in the Old World for millennia, came to the Americas and became staples there as well. Sugarcane, originally from New Guinea, was planted in the Caribbean and Brazil, and its cultivation drove much of the horrific transatlantic slave trade that followed, as plantation owners sought labor to work these crops. The movement of plants and animals and people reshaped the entire planet. Horses, reintroduced to the Americas by the Spanish, transformed the lives of indigenous peoples on the Great Plains. The buffalo hunts that we associate with tribes like the Lakota and Comanche only became possible because of horses, which allowed hunters to keep pace with the great herds. Ecosystems changed. Populations grew, sometimes explosively, as new crops provided more calories. The world became interconnected in ways that had never existed before, a single, complex web of trade and exchange and influence. Ferdinand Magellan, a Portuguese explorer sailing for Spain, set out in 1519 with 5 ships and about 270 men. His goal was to find a western route to the Spice Islands, the fabled Moluccas, the source of cloves and nutmeg, and other valuable spices that were worth their weight in gold in European markets. The journey was brutal beyond imagining. They sailed south along the coast of South America, searching for a passage through the continent. Weeks turned into months. Supplies ran low, the crew grew restless, and there were mutinies, which Magellan suppressed harshly. When they finally found a strait at the southern tip of South America, now called the Strait of Magellan, it took over a month to navigate its treacherous waters, threading between rocky shores under constant threat of being dashed to pieces. Then they entered an ocean so vast and, at first, so calm compared to the Atlantic storms they had endured that Magellan named it the Pacific, the peaceful sea. But peaceful it was not, at least not for the voyagers. They sailed for 3 months and 20 days without seeing land, crossing an expanse of water larger than all the land on Earth combined. The provisions ran out. The water turned foul. The men ate rats, which became a delicacy, selling for half a ducat each. They ate the leather from the rigging, softening it in seawater and roasting it over coals. They ate sawdust. Scurvy, caused by lack of vitamin C, ravaged the crew. Their gums swelled and bled, their teeth fell out, their old wounds reopened. Many died, their bodies committed to the depths of that vast ocean. When they finally reached the islands that would later be called the Philippines, Magellan himself was killed in a skirmish with local warriors led by a chief named Lapu-Lapu, who refused to submit to Spanish authority. The expedition, reduced to 2 ships, continued westward. They crossed the Indian Ocean, rounded the Cape of Good Hope at the southern tip of Africa, and sailed north up the Atlantic. Only one ship, the Victoria, made it back to Spain in 1522, carrying just 18 survivors out of the original 270. But they had done it. They had circumnavigated the globe, proving beyond any doubt that the Earth was round, that all the oceans were connected, that it was possible, though barely, to sail around the entire world. Let your body relax even more deeply now. Feel the weight of history, not as a burden, but as a gentle pressure, like a blanket settling over you. You are held by this story. You are part of it. And you can rest in the knowledge that others have faced impossible challenges before you and endured and found their way home. In the centuries that followed, European powers continued to explore, to colonize, to extract wealth from lands far from home. The British established colonies in North America, where pilgrims and settlers sought new lives and often came into conflict with the indigenous peoples who had lived there for thousands of years. They colonized India, ruling over hundreds of millions of people, extracting resources and imposing their systems of government. They claimed Australia, where Aboriginal peoples had lived for over 60,000 years, perhaps the oldest continuous culture on Earth, and displaced them, imposing British law and culture. They carved up Africa, drawing arbitrary borders that ignored ethnic and cultural realities, borders that would cause conflict for generations. The Spanish claimed vast territories in Central and South America, establishing viceroyalties that lasted for centuries, extracting silver and gold that flowed back to Europe and fueled economic growth. The Portuguese controlled Brazil, the largest country in South America, and established trading posts along the coasts of Africa and Asia. The French colonized parts of North America, the Caribbean, Southeast Asia, and West Africa. The Dutch established a global trading empire with colonies in Indonesia, South Africa, and the Caribbean. The Belgians, under King Leopold II, brutally exploited the Congo, extracting rubber and other resources at a horrific human cost. This era brought wealth and power to Europe, but it came at a terrible cost to the colonized. Indigenous peoples were displaced from their ancestral lands, forced to move to make way for plantations and settlements. Millions were enslaved, taken from Africa and brought across the Atlantic in brutal conditions, packed into the holds of ships where many died before ever reaching land. Those who survived were forced to work on plantations, in mines, in homes, their labor building the wealth of empires. Cultures were suppressed, languages forbidden, spiritual practices outlawed. The legacy of colonialism, the wounds it inflicted, the inequalities it created, are still being reckoned with today. And yet, even in the midst of exploitation and suffering, human creativity and resilience shone through. In the Americas, new cultures emerged, blending indigenous, European and African influences in ways that created something entirely new. In the Caribbean, in Brazil, in Mexico, music evolved. Rhythms from Africa meeting melodies from Europe and instruments from indigenous traditions. Jazz would later emerge from this, mixing blues and gospel and soul, art forms that would change the world. In cuisine, foods from 3 continents combined to create dishes that define regions today. In language, creoles and patois developed, mixing vocabulary and grammar in creative ways. People resisted, sometimes openly in revolts and rebellions, sometimes quietly by preserving their traditions, passing down stories and songs and practices in secret, adapting, surviving, maintaining their humanity in the face of systems designed to strip it away. Across the Pacific, long before European ships ventured far from shore, Polynesian navigators had been exploring, accomplishing feats of seamanship that remain extraordinary even by modern standards. Without compasses or maps, without the instruments that European sailors relied upon, they sailed thousands of miles across open ocean in double-hulled canoes. They used their knowledge of stars, watching how certain stars rose and set at particular points on the horizon, depending on latitude. They read ocean swells, feeling the direction and pattern of waves even when out of sight of land. They watched cloud patterns, knowing that clouds often form over islands, visible from many miles away. They observed the flight paths of birds, certain species that fly out from land to feed and return in the evening, birds that could guide them to islands beyond the horizon. They settled islands scattered across a vast expanse of water, from Hawaii in the north to New Zealand, which they call Aotearoa in the south, from Easter Island, called Rapa Nui, in the east to Fiji in the west. This triangle of ocean covers an area larger than all the continents combined, and yet they navigated it, settling on tiny specks of land thousands of miles apart. It was, and remains, one of the most extraordinary feats of navigation in human history. These voyages carried with them plants and animals, taro and breadfruit, chickens and pigs, carefully cultivated during long voyages. They brought their stories and traditions, their gods and customs, and they created vibrant cultures uniquely adapted to island life, cultures that honored the ocean, that understood the delicate balance of living on small pieces of land surrounded by vast expanses of water. Take another breath now. Let it fill you completely and then let it go, slowly, releasing any tension that remains. You are doing so well, just listening, just being present with the flow of history. There is nothing you need to do but rest. As the 18th century dawned, the world was on the cusp of a transformation more profound than anything since the agricultural revolution 12,000 years before. In Britain, inventors and entrepreneurs began to harness a new source of power: steam. The steam engine, refined by James Watt and others, could do the work of many horses or many men, tirelessly, day and night. It could power looms to weave cloth faster than any hand could manage. It could drive pumps to drain water from deep mines, allowing miners to extract coal and minerals from depths that had been impossible before. It could turn hammers that forged iron and steel. The Industrial Revolution had begun. Factories rose in cities like Manchester and Birmingham and Liverpool, tall buildings with many windows, filled with machines that clattered and roared. Workers, many of them leaving farms for the first time, drawn by the promise of wages, crowded into these cities seeking employment. Entire families worked in factories, including children as young as 5 or 6, their small hands useful for tasks like crawling under machines or tying threads. The work was hard, often dangerous. Accidents were common, fingers caught in gears, lungs filled with dust and fibers, bodies exhausted from 12 or 14-hour days. Conditions were grim, housing crowded and unsanitary, disease spreading quickly in the packed tenements. But the productivity was unprecedented. Goods that had once taken weeks to make by hand could now be produced in days or hours. Cloth, iron, tools, all became cheaper and more available, accessible to more people than ever before. The steam engine also revolutionized transportation in ways that shrank the world. In 1825, the first public railway opened in England, connecting the towns of Stockton and Darlington. A steam locomotive pulled wagons filled with coal and passengers, traveling faster than any horse. It was a sensation. People came from miles around just to see it. Soon, railways crisscrossed the country, then the continent, then the world. Travel that had once taken days or weeks now took hours. Goods could be shipped faster and cheaper than ever before, opening up markets and possibilities. In 1869, the Transcontinental Railroad was completed in the United States, linking the Atlantic and Pacific coasts. The final spike, a golden one, was driven at Promontory Summit in Utah, and suddenly it was possible to travel from New York to San Francisco in less than a week, a journey that had previously taken months by wagon or ship around South America. Ships, too, were transformed. Steamships, no longer dependent on wind, no longer at the mercy of calm seas or contrary currents, could travel reliably across oceans on schedule. The Suez Canal, opened in 1869 after 10 years of construction, connected the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea, drastically shortening the journey from Europe to Asia. Ships no longer had to sail around the entire continent of Africa, saving weeks of travel. The Panama Canal, completed in 1914 after decades of effort and enormous loss of life, much of it from diseases like yellow fever and malaria, linked the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, saving ships the long and dangerous journey around the southern tip of South America through the stormy waters of Cape Horn. Electricity, harnessed in the late 19th century, brought a new kind of magic to the world. Thomas Edison in America and Joseph Swan in Britain developed practical electric light bulbs, and suddenly the night was no longer dark, no longer something to be feared or endured. Cities glowed, their streets illuminated, their buildings lit from within. Work could continue after sunset. Factories ran around the clock. People could read and socialize in the evenings without straining by candlelight. Electric trams carried passengers through city streets, cleaner and quieter than horse-drawn carriages. Elevators powered by electricity made tall buildings practical, and skyscrapers began to rise, transforming urban skylines, reaching heights that would have been impossible when people had to climb stairs. Communication, too, was revolutionized. The telegraph, invented in the 1830s and 1840s, used electrical pulses sent through wires to transmit messages across vast distances almost instantaneously. News that once took weeks to travel by ship or rider could now arrive in minutes. The first transatlantic telegraph cable was laid in 1866 after several failed attempts, and suddenly messages could be sent between Europe and North America in hours instead of the weeks it took for a ship to cross. In 1876, Alexander Graham Bell patented the telephone, a device that could transmit the human voice over wires, allowing people to have conversations across distances. People could now speak to loved ones far away, hear their voices in real time, share news and comfort without waiting for letters. It was astonishing, almost miraculous. And then, in 1895, Guglielmo Marconi demonstrated wireless telegraphy, sending signals through the air without wires, using electromagnetic waves that traveled through space invisibly. Radio was born. By the early 20th century, radio broadcasts brought news, music, and entertainment into homes around the world. Families gathered around radio sets in the evenings, listening to programs, to speeches, to stories told by voices they would never see. For the first time, people could experience events as they happened, even if those events were happening on the other side of the planet. When the Hindenburg airship burst into flames in 1937, a radio reporter's emotional description brought the tragedy into living rooms across America. When World War II began, people heard Churchill's speeches, Roosevelt's fireside chats, hearing their leaders' voices directly, feeling connected to the great events of their time. Let yourself sink deeper now. Feel the softness beneath you, the quiet around you. The story continues, and you are carried by it, gently, peacefully. There is nowhere else you need to be. The 20th century was a time of extraordinary progress and equally extraordinary destruction, of leaps forward and devastating steps back. Medicine advanced rapidly, saving lives in ways that would have seemed like miracles to earlier generations. Anesthesia made surgery bearable, allowing operations that would have been impossible when patients were conscious and in agony. Antiseptics, pioneered by Joseph Lister, made surgery safer, preventing the infections that had killed so many after operations. In 1928, Alexander Fleming, a Scottish bacteriologist, noticed something curious in his lab. A petri dish contaminated with mold had a clear zone around it where bacteria were not growing. The mold was penicillium, and it was producing a substance that killed bacteria. He called it penicillin, and it became the first true antibiotic. It transformed medicine completely. Infections that had once been death sentences became treatable. Soldiers wounded in World War II survived wounds that would have killed soldiers in earlier wars. Pneumonia, tuberculosis, sepsis, all became less deadly. Millions of lives were saved. Vaccines, too, saved millions. Building on the work of Edward Jenner, who had developed the smallpox vaccine in the 18th century, scientists created vaccines for polio, measles, mumps, rubella, diphtheria, tetanus, and many other diseases. Smallpox, which had killed hundreds of millions over the course of human history, leaving survivors scarred and sometimes blind, was targeted for eradication. Through a coordinated global effort, health workers traveled to every corner of the world, vaccinating people, tracking down cases containing outbreaks. The last naturally occurring case of smallpox was recorded in Somalia in 1977, and in 1980, the World Health Organization declared the disease eradicated. It remains the only human disease to be completely eliminated, a testament to what humanity can achieve when it works together toward a common goal. But the 20th century also saw horrors on an unprecedented scale. Wars fought with industrial technology that turned killing into something systematic and efficient. The First World War, which began in 1914, was unlike any conflict that had come before. Advances in technology, machine guns that could fire hundreds of rounds per minute, artillery that could rain shells from miles away, poison gas that choked and blinded, tanks that could roll over trenches, aircraft that could drop bombs from above. All of these turned battlefields into slaughterhouses. Millions of young men died in trenches, fighting over a few miles of mud in France and Belgium, living in conditions of unimaginable squalor, surrounded by rats and disease, going over the top into hails of machine gun fire. The war ended in 1918, but the peace was fragile, the wounds deep, both physical and psychological. An entire generation was traumatized, and the economic and political instability that followed would set the stage for even greater horrors. Just 2 decades later, the world was plunged into an even more devastating conflict. The Second World War, which lasted from 1939 to 1945, claimed an estimated 60 to 80 million lives. It was a truly global war, fought on every continent except Antarctica, from the beaches of Normandy to the jungles of Burma, from the deserts of North Africa to the islands of the Pacific. It was also a war of ideologies, a struggle between fascism and democracy, totalitarianism and freedom. Nazi Germany under Adolf Hitler sought to dominate Europe and exterminate entire populations it deemed inferior. The Holocaust, the systematic murder of 6 million Jews and millions of others, Romani people, disabled individuals, political dissidents, LGBTQ people, remains one of the darkest chapters in human history, a reminder of the depths of cruelty humans are capable of when hatred and prejudice are allowed to flourish unchecked, when ordinary people participate in or turn a blind eye to atrocities. Yet even in the midst of unimaginable suffering, there were acts of extraordinary courage and compassion. People hid their neighbors from persecution, risking their own lives and the lives of their families to save others. Oskar Schindler, a German industrialist, saved over 1,000 Jews by employing them in his factories. Raoul Wallenberg, a Swedish diplomat, issued protective passports and sheltered thousands in Budapest. Tsuno Sugihara, a Japanese diplomat in Lithuania, defied his government's orders and issued visas that allowed thousands to escape. Ordinary people resisted tyranny in small and large ways, smuggling food, passing information, sabotaging operations, maintaining their humanity in circumstances designed to strip it away. And when the war finally ended, when the last shots were fired and the prisoners were liberated, and soldiers began to return home, there was a determination that it must never happen again. In 1945, 50 nations came together in San Francisco to sign the Charter of the United Nations, an organization dedicated to maintaining international peace and security, promoting human rights, and fostering cooperation on global challenges. It was not perfect. The UN has been criticized many times for its failures, its inability to prevent conflicts, its slow responses. But it represented a profound shift, an acknowledgement that nations needed to work together, that disputes needed to be resolved through dialogue rather than violence. 3 years later, in 1948, the UN adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a document proclaiming that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights, that everyone is entitled to life, liberty, and security. that no one should be subjected to torture or slavery or arbitrary arrest, that everyone has the right to education, to work, to participate in the cultural life of their community. It was an ideal, and like all ideals, it has not always been realized. Many nations have violated these principles, and many still do. But the declarations set a standard, a vision of what the world could be, and it has inspired countless activists and movements fighting for justice. Breathe deeply now, deeply and slowly. You are safe here in this moment. The wars are over, the suffering has passed. What remains is the story, the long arc of history bending, slowly, often painfully, towards something better. You are part of that arc. You are part of that bending. The second half of the 20th century saw rapid decolonization, the dismantling of the European empires that had dominated much of the world for centuries. The cost of the world wars had weakened European powers and colonized peoples, inspired by ideals of self-determination and freedom, demanded independence. India, which had been under British rule for nearly 200 years, gained independence in 1947, though the partition into India and Pakistan was accompanied by horrific violence and massive displacement. Across Africa, nations threw off colonial rule in the 1950s and 1960s. From Ghana in 1957, the first sub-Saharan African nation to gain independence, to Angola in 1975. In Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Malaysia, and others became independent. It was not always peaceful. Borders drawn by colonial powers often ignored ethnic and cultural realities, lumping together groups with long histories of conflict or dividing peoples who shared language and culture. Wars broke out, and many nations struggled with instability and poverty. But a new world order was emerging, one in which self-determination was increasingly recognized as a fundamental right, one in which peoples could govern themselves, could reclaim their cultures and languages, could chart their own courses. The Cold War, a tense standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union, dominated international relations from the end of World War II until 1991. It was a war fought not with direct military conflict between the superpowers, which would have been catastrophic given their nuclear arsenals, but through proxy wars in Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, and elsewhere, through espionage and intelligence operations, through propaganda and ideological competition, through an arms race that saw both sides build up enormous arsenals of nuclear weapons, enough to destroy the world many times over. The threat of nuclear annihilation hung over the world like a dark cloud. Children in the 1950s and 60s practiced duck and cover drills in schools, as if hiding under a desk would protect them from an atomic bomb. In 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, the United States and the Soviet Union came terrifyingly close to nuclear war. For 13 days, the world held its breath as the two superpowers faced off. Soviet missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from Florida, American ships blockading the island. But cooler heads prevailed. Diplomacy, quiet negotiations, and a willingness to step back from the brink prevented catastrophe. The missiles were withdrawn. Humanity had looked into the abyss and chosen not to jump. And then, in 1989, something remarkable happened that few had predicted. The Berlin Wall, which had divided East and West Berlin since 1961, a concrete barrier topped with barbed wire and guarded by soldiers with orders to shoot anyone trying to cross, a symbol of the division between Communist East and Capitalist West, was torn down. It happened almost spontaneously. A miscommunication at a press conference led East German officials to announce that travel restrictions were being lifted immediately. Thousands of people rushed to the wall, demanding to cross. Guards, overwhelmed and without clear orders, opened the gates. People poured through, celebrating, crying, embracing strangers. On both sides of the wall, armed with hammers and pickaxes and bare hands, people attacked it, breaking it apart, taking pieces as souvenirs, dancing in the streets. The Cold War, which had defined global politics for over 4 decades, was ending not with bombs, but with celebration. 2 years later, the Soviet Union itself dissolved, ending peacefully, a superpower collapsing not from external attack, but from internal contradictions and the desire of its people for change. It was a moment of hope, a belief that perhaps the worst conflicts could be resolved without bloodshed, that history was moving toward greater freedom and democracy. Meanwhile, technology continued its relentless advance. In 1969, humanity achieved something that had been dreamed of for millennia, a goal that had existed in myths and stories long before it seemed remotely possible. Apollo 11, a spacecraft launched from Earth by a massive Saturn V rocket, carried 3 astronauts to the Moon. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins traveled 250,000 miles through the vacuum of space, beyond the protection of Earth's atmosphere, beyond the pull of Earth's gravity, to land on another celestial body. On July the 20th, Neil Armstrong climbed down a ladder from the lunar module Eagle and stepped onto the Moon's surface, the first human being to set foot on another world. His words, transmitted back to Earth and heard by hundreds of millions of people watching on television, were simple but profound, carefully chosen for their historic significance. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. It was true. In that moment, humanity was no longer bound to a single planet. We had reached out and touched the heavens. The images sent back from the Moon, transmitted across space and appearing on television screens around the world, changed how we see ourselves. The photographs of Earth rising above the lunar horizon, taken by the astronauts, showed our planet in a way it had never been seen before. Earth looked so blue, so vibrant with swirling white clouds and vast oceans, green and brown landmasses visible beneath. And it was so small, hanging in the infinite blackness of space, solitary and fragile. There were no borders visible from that distance, no divisions between nations or peoples. Just one small world, our only home in an unimaginably vast and empty cosmos. Those images helped spark the environmental movement, the awareness that our planet is finite and precious, that we need to take care of it, that we are all in this together. Let that image fill your mind now, gently. Earth, blue and green and white, swirling with clouds, glowing softly in the darkness. You are on that planet. You are part of it, and it is part of you. You are made of the same atoms as the oceans and mountains, the same elements as the trees and animals. You are not separate from Earth. You are Earth. Become conscious, looking back at itself. The late 20th century saw the rise of the computer age, a transformation in how we process and share information. Computers had existed since the 1940s, but they were enormous, room-sized machines accessible only to governments, universities, and large corporations, used for calculating missile trajectories and breaking codes during World War II. But in the 1970s, pioneers working in garages and small companies began to develop personal computers, machines small enough and affordable enough for individuals. The Apple II, introduced in 1977, and the IBM personal computer, released in 1981, brought computing into homes and offices. In the 1980s and 1990s, computers became commonplace, used for everything from word processing to accounting to gaming. Software evolved, becoming more user-friendly, more powerful. The Internet, originally a military and academic network called ARPANET, designed to ensure communication could continue even if parts of the network were destroyed, opened to the public in the 1990s and grew exponentially. By the turn of the millennium, millions of people around the world were connected, able to access information that would have taken days or weeks to find in libraries, able to communicate with others across vast distances instantaneously through email and chat rooms and forums. The World Wide Web, invented by Tim Berners-Lee in 1989, made the Internet accessible through browsers and hyperlinks, transforming it from a tool for specialists into something anyone could use. The smartphone, which combined a computer, a camera, a music player, a telephone, and access to the Internet into a single pocket-sized device, became ubiquitous in the early 21st century. The iPhone, introduced in 2007, was not the first smartphone, but it popularized the concept, and soon billions of people around the world carried these devices with them everywhere. Social media platforms, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and many others allowed people to share their lives, their thoughts, their creativity with audiences they could never have reached before. A video uploaded in one country could be viewed by millions worldwide within hours. Movements for social justice could organize and spread rapidly, coordinating protests, sharing information, raising awareness. The Arab Spring, a wave of uprisings across the Middle East in 2011, was facilitated in part by social media, which allowed activists to communicate and organize in ways that authoritarian governments struggled to control. Information, which had once been controlled by a few gatekeepers, by newspapers and television networks and governments that could decide what people saw and heard, became democratized. Anyone with an internet connection could learn almost anything, could take courses from top universities, could access books and articles and videos on virtually any subject. Anyone could make their voice heard, could start a blog or a channel or a podcast, could connect with communities of like-minded people anywhere on Earth. It was, and is, an extraordinary democratization of knowledge and communication. This connectivity has brought both tremendous benefits and new challenges. It has enabled movements for social justice to organize and spread rapidly, from Black Lives Matter to Me Too, giving voice to the marginalized and oppressed. It has allowed scientists to collaborate across borders, sharing data and findings, accelerating discovery in fields from medicine to climate science. It has connected families separated by distance, allowing grandparents to watch their grandchildren grow up on video calls, allowing immigrants to stay in touch with loved ones thousands of miles away. But it has also enabled the spread of misinformation and conspiracy theories, which can go viral faster than corrections. It has amplified division and polarization, as algorithms show people content that confirms their existing beliefs, creating echo chambers where everyone agrees and dissenting voices are absent. It has eroded privacy, as our data is collected and sold and used in ways we often don't understand or control. It has enabled new forms of harassment and bullying, where anonymity can bring out the worst in people. Like all tools, technology is neither inherently good nor bad. It is what we make of it, how we choose to use it, the values we bring to it. And here we are now, in the early decades of the 21st century. Over 8 billion people inhabit this planet, more than at any time in history, more than double the population in 1970. We live longer, healthier lives than our ancestors could have imagined. In 1900, global life expectancy was about 31 years. Today, it is over 72 years. Child mortality has plummeted. In 1800, nearly half of all children died before age 5. Today, that number is below 5% globally, still too high, but a dramatic improvement. Literacy has soared. In 1800, only about 12% of the world's population could read and write. Today, it is over 86%. More people live in democracies, with the ability to vote and participate in how they are governed, than ever before. Extreme poverty, while still far too common, has declined dramatically. In 1990, more than a third of the world lived on less than $2 a day. By 2015, that number had dropped to less than 10%, though the COVID-19 pandemic reversed some of these gains. But we also face challenges of a scale and complexity that are unprecedented. Climate change, driven by the burning of fossil fuels, coal and oil and gas, for energy and transportation, threatens to destabilize the very systems that support life on Earth. Average global temperatures have risen over 1 degree Celsius since pre-industrial times, and the pace is accelerating. Ice caps and glaciers are melting. Sea levels are rising, threatening coastal cities home to hundreds of millions of people. Weather patterns are becoming more extreme, with more intense hurricanes, longer droughts, more severe floods. Ecosystems are collapsing. Coral reefs are bleaching and dying, unable to survive in warmer, more acidic oceans. Forests are shrinking, cleared for agriculture and development. Species are going extinct at rates not seen since the age of the dinosaurs. A mass extinction event happening not over millions of years, but over decades, driven by human activity. Inequality, both within and between nations, remains stark. The richest 1% of the world's population owns more wealth than the bottom half combined. Billions of people still lack access to clean water, adequate food, basic healthcare, education. Conflict and displacement drive millions of people from their homes, refugees fleeing war and persecution, seeking safety and opportunity. Pandemics, as the world learned painfully beginning in 2020 with the outbreak of COVID-19, a novel coronavirus that originated in China and spread globally within weeks, can disrupt lives and economies everywhere, killing millions, forcing lockdowns, overwhelming healthcare systems, exposing the fragility of our interconnected world. Yet there is also reason for hope. Renewable energy, solar panels and wind turbines is becoming cheaper and more widespread. In many places, it is now less expensive to build new renewable energy capacity than to maintain old fossil fuel plants. Electric vehicles are replacing those powered by gasoline and diesel, reducing emissions and air pollution. Battery technology is improving, storing energy more efficiently. Scientists and engineers are developing new technologies to capture carbon from the atmosphere, to restore ecosystems, to grow food more sustainably, to use resources more efficiently. Some of these technologies are speculative, still in development, but others are being deployed now, making a difference. Activists and ordinary citizens around the world are demanding action, holding leaders accountable, working in their own communities to create change. Young people, recognizing that they will inherit the consequences of decisions made today, are at the forefront of climate activism. organizing strikes and protests, demanding that governments and corporations take meaningful action. Greta Thunberg, a Swedish teenager, inspired millions with her school strike for climate. Her simple message that our house is on fire and we need to act like it. Indigenous communities who have stewarded their lands for generations are leading efforts to protect forests and ecosystems, often at great personal risk. Scientists are providing clear evidence of what is happening and what needs to be done, even when their findings are uncomfortable or politically inconvenient. And perhaps most importantly, we are more aware than ever before of our interconnectedness. The challenges we face do not respect borders. Climate change, pandemics, economic instability, they are global problems that require global cooperation. And we have the tools, the knowledge, and, increasingly, the will to work together. The Paris Agreement, signed by nearly every nation in 2015, commits countries to limiting global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius. It is not perfect. Many nations are not meeting their commitments. But it represents a recognition that we are all in this together, that what happens in one part of the world affects everyone. You are part of this moment. You are living through history, even as history lives through you. Every choice you make, every act of kindness, every effort to learn, to understand, to build bridges rather than walls, adds to the great unfolding story of humanity. You are not a passive observer. You are a participant, an author of the future. The choices you make about how you live, how you consume, how you treat others, how you vote, how you spend your time and energy, all of it matters. All of it contributes to what comes next. Breathe now, deeply, fully. Feel the air filling your lungs, the oxygen nourishing every cell in your body. You are alive. You are here. And that is no small thing. All of human history, 200,000 years of struggle and survival, of heartbreak and triumph, of cruelty and compassion, has led to this moment. You are the product of an unbroken chain of ancestors who survived famine and plague, war and exile, hardship beyond imagining. Every single one of them lived long enough to have children, and their children had children, generation after generation, an unbroken thread stretching back through time to those first humans. Walking upright in Africa, you carry their DNA, you carry their resilience. In your body are genetic adaptations that help them survive ice ages and droughts, that gave them resistance to diseases, that allowed them to digest new foods when they migrated to new lands. You are, quite literally, the sum of their survival, the living embodiment of their success. But you are more than your biology. You are also the inheritor of their cultures, their knowledge, their wisdom. Every word you speak is part of a language that has evolved over tens of thousands of years, shaped by countless speakers before you, each adding words, changing pronunciations, adapting to new contexts. Every idea you have builds on ideas that came before, a vast cumulative edifice of human thought, stretching back to the first philosopher who asked why, to the first scientist who tested a hypothesis, to the first artist who looked at a blank wall and imagined what could be painted there. You stand on the shoulders of giants, of people whose names are mostly lost, but whose contributions echo through time. And someday, if you choose, you too will pass something forward. Perhaps children carrying your genes and your values into the future, telling their children stories you told them. Perhaps ideas, inventions, art, contributions to fields that will benefit people you will never meet. Perhaps acts of kindness that ripple outward in ways you cannot predict or measure. A smile or a word of encouragement that changes someone's day, that changes their trajectory, that leads to something you will never know about, but that matters nonetheless. Or perhaps simply the quiet influence of a life lived with intention, with compassion, with awareness, showing others by example that it is possible to be kind in a hard world, to be hopeful in the face of difficulty, to be generous when it would be easier to be selfish. All of it matters. All of it is part of the story. Let yourself relax completely now. There is nothing more you need to do tonight. You have walked with me through the long arc of human history, from the savannas of Africa to the present day. You have seen the rise of language and agriculture, the building of cities and empires, the asking of profound questions, the connection of continents, the transformation of life through technology, the triumphs and tragedies that have shaped our species. And through it all, one thing remains constant: the extraordinary resilience and creativity of human beings. We have faced extinction and survived. We have endured plagues and wars and disasters and rebuilt. We have lost and grieved and found ways to keep going. We have made mistakes, terrible mistakes, and yet we have also created beauty, discovered truth, shown compassion, reached for something greater than ourselves. You are part of that lineage. You carry within you the strength of all who came before. And that strength is not just physical. It is the strength to adapt, to learn, to grow, to love, to hope, to imagine a better world and work toward it. It is the strength to get up after falling, to try again after failing, to remain kind even when treated unkindly, to maintain hope even when circumstances seem hopeless. So as you drift now towards sleep, let yourself rest in this knowledge. You are connected to every human who has ever lived, to Lucy walking across the savannah, to the first person who spoke a word and was understood, to the farmers planting the first seeds, to the builders raising pyramids and temples, to the philosophers pondering existence, to the explorers sailing into unknown seas, to the artists creating beauty from chaos, to the scientists unlocking the secrets of the universe, to the activists fighting for justice, to the parents nurturing children, to the friends offering comfort, to the strangers showing unexpected kindness. You are all of this. You are the continuation of a story that began in the deep past and will continue into the distant future. You are a link in an unbroken chain, a thread in a tapestry of staggering complexity and beauty. And you are also something more. You are the universe become conscious of itself. The atoms in your body, the carbon and oxygen and nitrogen and all the rest, were forged in the hearts of dying stars billions of years ago. When massive stars exhausted their fuel and exploded in supernovas, they scattered these elements across space. Some of them, drifting through the cosmos for eons, eventually coalesced into our solar system, into our planet, into the first living cells, into the long chain of life that led, ultimately, to you. You are made of stardust. This is not poetry. This is literal fact. Every atom in your body except for hydrogen, which dates back to the Big Bang itself, 13.8 billion years ago, was created in a star. The iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones, the oxygen you breathe, all of it was forged in stellar furnaces. You are the universe looking back at itself, pondering its own existence. You are billions of years of cosmic evolution made manifest in a thinking, feeling, wondering being. And when you close your eyes and rest, You are part of the great rhythm of existence, the inhale and exhale of the cosmos. Galaxies are born and die. Stars ignite and fade. Planets form and dissolve. And yet, improbably, miraculously, here you are, in this brief moment between eternities, conscious and aware, capable of love and thought and wonder. There is nowhere else you need to be. There is nothing else you need to do. You have witnessed the journey. You have felt the connection. And now it is time to let go, to surrender to sleep, to trust that the story will continue tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. The world will turn, the sun will rise, life will go on, and you will be part of it, rested and renewed, ready to add your verse to the great ongoing poem of humanity. So let your body become completely heavy now. Let every muscle release its tension. Your face is soft, your jaw is loose, your shoulders have dropped away from your ears. Your arms are heavy at your sides, your hands are still. Your chest rises and falls in a slow, natural rhythm. Your belly is soft, your legs are heavy, your feet are warm and relaxed. You are held by the surface beneath you, supported completely, safe. Let your mind grow quiet. The thoughts that flutter and dart like birds can settle now, can find their perches and grow still. There is no need to follow them, no need to engage. They are just thoughts, and they will be there tomorrow if you need them. Tonight, you can let them go. You can let everything go. You are floating now, floating on the surface of time itself, held by the same forces that have held every human who came before you. Gravity, which keeps you anchored to this planet, is the same force that holds the planets in orbit around the sun, the same force that binds galaxies together, the same force that shapes the structure of the universe. You are not separate from the cosmos. You are part of it, woven into its fabric, held by its laws, sustained by its energy. And as you drift deeper into that soft space between waking and sleeping, into that twilight realm where consciousness begins to dissolve and dreams begin to form, remember this: you are not alone. You have never been alone. Even in your quietest moments, even when you feel most isolated, you are connected to something vast and ancient and ongoing. The air you breathe has been breathed by countless others before you, cycling through lungs and leaves for billions of years. The water in your body has cycled through rivers and oceans and rain, through the bodies of dinosaurs and ancient forests, for billions of years. The energy that keeps you alive, that powers every thought and heartbeat, comes ultimately from the sun, which has been shining for 4.5 billion years and will continue to shine for billions more. You are part of a continuity that stretches from the beginning of time to the end of time. You are part of a story that is still being written, still unfolding, still discovering what it means to be human, to be conscious, to be alive in this strange and beautiful universe. And that is enough. You are enough, exactly as you are in this moment, with all your flaws and fears and uncertainties, with all your strengths and hopes and dreams. You are enough. You do not need to be anything other than what you are. You do not need to do anything other than rest. Rest now. Let sleep take you gently, like a tide carrying you out to sea, like a river carrying you downstream. Let the darkness be soft and welcoming, not empty, but full of possibility, full of dreams, full of the quiet peace that comes when you stop striving and simply allow yourself to be. There is no rush. There is only this: the slow unfolding of time, the quiet turning of the earth beneath you, the ancient, rhythm of breath and heartbeat and rest. You are safe. You are held. You are exactly where you belong. And as you slip into dreams, know that the story continues. Somewhere, right now, a child is being born, taking their first breath, crying out, beginning their own journey through time. Somewhere, someone is falling in love, discovering that profound connection between two souls, that recognition of seeing and being seen. Somewhere, someone is asking a question that has never been asked before, pushing at the boundaries of knowledge, expanding what is possible, what is known. Somewhere, someone is looking up at the stars, those same stars that guided ancient travelers, that inspired poets and dreamers for millennia, and feeling the same wonder that our ancestors felt 100,000 years ago, the same sense of awe at the vastness and beauty of existence. The story goes on. Life goes on. And you, dear traveler, you are part of it all. You always have been. You always will be. Even when you are gone, your influence will remain, rippling outward in ways you cannot see or measure. The kindness you showed to a stranger, the idea you shared, the love you gave, all of it continues. All of it matters. All of it becomes part of the great tapestry, woven in with billions of other threads to create something vast and intricate and beautiful. So drift now. Drift peacefully. Drift deeply. Let the weight of history become not a burden, but a comfort, a reminder that you are held by something larger than yourself, something infinitely patient and infinitely kind. You are a wave in an ocean that has no beginning and no end. You rise, you crest, you return to the depths, and the ocean goes on, eternal and unchanging. Sleep now, sleep well, sleep deeply. The universe is still unfolding, just as it has been for billions of years, just as it will be for billions more. The stars are still shining, those same stars that witnessed the entire journey of our species from the very beginning, that saw the first humans look up in wonder, that watched as we learned to speak and to write, to build and to dream. They are still there, still watching, still shining their ancient light across the darkness. And you are part of that light. You are a spark of consciousness in an infinite cosmos, brief but brilliant, small but significant. You matter. Your existence matters. The fact that you are here, now, in this moment, is the result of billions of years of cosmic evolution, millions of years of biological evolution, thousands of years of cultural evolution, and the choices and chances and circumstances of your own unique life. You are the universe becoming aware of itself, a part of the cosmos that can wonder and question and love. And that is beautiful. That is profound. That is enough. Good night now. Good night, traveler. Good night, dreamer. Good night, child of the stars. Rest easy in the knowledge that you are part of something vast and eternal and good. Rest easy in the knowledge that you are loved by time itself, held by forces older than mountains, connected to every living thing that has ever been or ever will be. You are home. You have always been home, and you always will be. Sleep now. Breathe. Rest. The story continues, and you are part of it. Forever. Always. In this moment and in all moments, you are the universe dreaming, and the dream is beautiful. Good night.